Do you know the 14 traits of successful chiropractors? We've interviewed some of the top chiropractors in the industry and have identified the common traits that they all share. Jump on over to www.chirobusinessmojo.com to get your free report today.
Welcome to the Chiro Business Mojo podcast, where we deconstruct the methods, marketing, and mindset of successful business people and chiropractors from around the world. And now your host, Dr. Richard Day.
That's right, I am Dr. Richard Day, and this is the Chiro Business Mojo podcast. Hello once again, and thank you for checking in with me. Well, today on the show, I have got Dr. Anthony Lombardi. He had 3 years of study in kinesiology at McMaster University, followed by 4 years at New York Chiropractic College, where he received his Doctorate of Chiropractic. He has a special interest in sports injuries and practices in Hamilton, Ontario at Hamilton Back Clinic. He's the clinic director and co-founder of this successful full-scale clinic offering services in chiropractic, medical acupuncture, laser, physiotherapy, automobile accidents, therapeutic massage, and naturopathic medicine. He's the author of Exstore Assessment and Treatment System, and Exstore materials and books are now available in 25 countries worldwide. He's been a contributor to publications such as Canadian Chiropractor, Health, Wellness, and Safety Magazine, Inside Fitness, and more. In 2013, he was one of 5 nominated for the Chiropractor of the Year award in Ontario out of a pool of over 4,000. Dr. Lombardi has treated a number of professional athletes, including the National Lacrosse League, the Canadian Football League, and more. He's also presided over 98,000 patient visits in 13 years of practice at Hamilton Back Clinic. Welcome, Dr. Anthony Lombardi.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us today, and I invite you to jump in and fill in any of the gaps I may have missed in that bio.
All the pleasure's all mine, Dr. Day. I read over the bio, and it's perfect.
Thank you. Well, good. Let's get right to it then. I want to take you back, though. Let's talk about the beginning. How did you become a chiropractor?
Well, when I was in high school, I was an athlete, and I played basketball and I played football, and I would get injuries, and I found initially I would go to my family doctor. A medical doctor would just give me pills or just say rest, and then I started going to a chiropractor, and I found that I was getting back on the field or back on the court much faster than just rest or doing nothing. And then that inspired me to study hard and become a chiropractor moving forward.
Well, take us back to the moment when you walk across the stage and you have completed the education, you have that proud moment, your family is there, your friends are there, and your future is in front of you. Describe for us that journey from that moment to your first success in chiropractic.
Well, right after graduation, my goal was to open up my own practice right out of school. And in fact, I had that lined up. I had that ready. I even had a lease signed. So at that point, I was definitely happy. I was definitely excited about the future, but at the same time, focused on passing my board exams, because that very same day that I graduated, which ironically is December 2nd, 2002, which is today.
Wow.
I had to drive to Quebec City to write my Canadian board exams. So it was kind of bittersweet because you're excited, but at the same time you're like, I've already signed a lease. I better pass these exams.
So you had a little bit of urgency there, it sounds like.
I did. But sometimes the pressure of tests makes us all better learners, and it all worked out.
Well, it certainly sounds as if you did some advanced planning and you had some urgency, to get there and succeed. What else were the early keys to your success?
Well, definitely family. My wife, she's been a fantastic sense of support. She's been a pillar of support throughout the entire process from the very time I graduated to today. Also my parents, my family helping me within the business. And then secondly, and I think this goes for all cases, all walks of life, is simply hard work. There's no other way to put it. Just simply working hard, making sacrifices within yourself, sometimes putting the business before other things that you want to do, so you can reap the rewards later on.
Yeah, I think you absolutely are right on that. And that's the part that's maybe not as glamorous. It doesn't sound as good as, 3 hacks that you can apply tomorrow to have a huge practice. The truth is there's a lot of hard work in it, and it's something that it sounds like you were aware of early on.
Definitely. And it's part of that is out of the fear of failure, really. You don't want to fail. You want to succeed. You've invested, the undergraduate and your postgraduate time, money, and your effort, and you want to do well because this is your future. So sometimes that's a great motivator as well.
Well, let's shift forward in time and bring you up to the present day. And you have had consistent success in private practice, and you've written a lot in major trade and commercial publications. So let's touch on some of those things. When it comes to private practice, what are your 3 keys to business success?
Well, basically, it comes down to 3 things. One is being able to provide outstanding clinical results. 2, being able to measure everything within the practice. And 3, being able to open enough to question everything. Essentially, providing outstanding clinical results is simple. If you want to get consistent patient referrals and you provide a product better than anyone's ever experienced before, then that's something people are going to tell other people about, and that's something that's going to attract people to you. In a business perspective, and I think we'll talk about this more, measuring everything is so important. Being able to measure everything from phone calls to how many patients come in, how many patients rebook is so important because what gets measured gets improved. That's why Olympic athletes or athletes measure how fast they run or how much weight they can lift, because that's how they gauge their progress. It's all on a method of measurement. If they didn't care, they would just lift whatever they felt like lifting or run whatever time they felt like running. But the whole point of improvement is measuring. And the last part is questioning everything, specifically what the norm is, and specifically what is taught what is taught traditionally in schools. Because most of the time, the really successful people in any business are the ones that are a little bit off the grid or do things a little bit differently than the norm.
Well, that absolutely makes sense, especially in the business world when we are trying to distinguish ourselves from our competitors and maybe, have a separate identity unique for our patients, and you're going to attract in maybe something a little different from the norm. So I'm looking forward to getting into that a little bit later. But let's talk first about the Exstore Assessment and Treatment System. I think it's very impressive that you've developed this, and tell us more about it.
So the Exstore Assessment and Treatment System, I officially developed in the January 2010. I had my first course January 2011, and I published a book called the Exstore Assessment and Treatment System in 2012. And essentially what it is, it's a functional assessment system which allows the practitioner, the therapist, the chiropractor, physical therapist, anyone who treats musculoskeletal problems to be able to assess a musculoskeletal problem and know how to proceed within about 2 minutes. What it does, it focuses on the concept of motor inhibition. It finds motor inhibition in the major muscles which stabilize the major girdles of the body, specifically the shoulder girdle and the pelvic girdle. And from there, it tells you what muscles are inhibited, which muscles are working, which muscles aren't. So then from there, you can go straight to treating those muscles and making lasting biomechanical changes. And this assessment system is not with any computers or anything like that. It's simply a progressive muscle testing based on the system itself. And anyone can learn it, and it's quite simple. And right now it's in 25 countries, so practitioners from around the world are starting to really embrace it.
Well, I love the idea of that, not only because what it's telling us about the body, but because in 2 minutes, that's huge, especially if you're seeing, a number of folks in your office, and the ability to quickly figure out what's going wrong and what you need to do to treat that patient is really valuable.
And it works because the majority of problems are functional. If someone comes in and says, I have shoulder bursitis or I have elbow tendonitis, that diagnosis doesn't tell us anything, because it's just a traditional diagnosis. So this allows us to focus on the cause or the functional cause of what's causing the consequence, which is the diagnosis, the elbow pain or the shoulder pain, so we can improve function and essentially then improve overall healing.
Yeah, that's great, especially in the world of reimbursement, where it's all about the functional improvements that we have to prove. So
exactly.
Go ahead.
And then that goes back to my first business point, providing outstanding clinical results. You provide results early and often, and people are going to talk about their success, and they're going to refer you more patients.
So let's say we've treated a patient, and and we have measured their success. We have shown that we have clinical success as well because we can measure that patient's progress. And you were talking about measurable metrics in an office as well. So let's go to that. What do we need to be measuring?
Well, essentially measuring everything, but of course, everything can't always be measured. And remember, this I started over time. You learn this over time when, through the years of practice where you need to improve. But specifically, the things that are most commonly measured in my office, one was what I call the rebook rate. So in my office, there's myself, there's another chiropractor, there's 2 physical therapists, there's massage therapists. And what I want to know at the end of each day is what's the rebook rate of the patients, meaning how many are following directions. So if the patient is better, if the patient is discharged and they don't come back, that counts as a 1 out of 1. So if let's say 10 people are seen that day, and out of 10 people, only 8 follow direction, 8 being the direction being either, okay, follow up next week or follow up next month, or you're okay. But if the 2 that are given direction to say, okay, we'd like you to come in a week, don't come in for whatever reason, say, well, I need to check my schedule, or I'm not sure what my schedule's like, then I count that as 8 out of 10. So that tells me essentially, one, how well are the therapists relaying the information and communicating with the patient, letting them know what they need to do to actually improve their condition. Because if we don't do a good job of expressing that to the patient's not going to know, and the patient's just going to assume, well, I guess maybe he doesn't want to see me again. And being in the position of authority, we need to communicate that to the patient and say, listen, I'm a professional. I'm the professional. In essence, you're saying this, I'm the professional. I know what's best for you. And this is what I think will help you get better faster. I know when I go to the doctor, any doctor, they tell me, listen, you need this or you need that. And I do it because I follow their direction. They're the professional. If they don't get that communication, if they don't get that direction, they're not going to do it. So that rebook rate tells me how well are the patients responding to our direction and how well are we providing that direction.
So after rebook rate, give us another metric that you say is one of the most important.
Measuring the number of phone calls coming in, and specifically now we're in a day and age where about 70% of my office receives appointment requests via text message. So for example, and I looked at this rate yesterday, actually I was preparing for the interview. So last month we received 1,440 text messages received from patients to our office in a month. So we're probably talking about 50 a day. And so these text messages represent patients confirming appointments, requesting appointments, asking questions, and things of that nature. And so that tells me, of course, let's say 10 years ago, we didn't have text messaging as an option. So what it tells me is we're getting less phone calls coming in, also more emails, but we're giving patients other options to communicate with our office, and I want to know, well, how well are we utilizing that? So that's another one, measuring how well the public is communicating with us via phone calls, text messages, emails, and then on social media, getting messages on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, because people request appointments that way as well.
Well, let's stop real quick. You just said social media, and that's become such a factor in marketing these days. In a nutshell, describe your social media campaign.
I would say I have a pretty progressive social media campaign compared to chiropractors in general. For instance, in Canada, they just had a survey and they surveyed all the chiropractors in Canada, and I believe almost 1,000 responded. And in fact, 30% of chiropractors in Canada do not have any social media presence at all. So, and I found that to be kind of surprising, but it's the truth. And part of the reason is because a lot of the chiropractors that are doing very, very well are the ones that have been practicing for a very long time, and they really can't be bothered. But my social media campaign really is, I use Facebook, I use Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, is simply staying in the public eye, so to speak, making sure that people always have information with regards to how to do something better, how to sit properly. So I'm directing them to my patients, and I'm also directing the articles that I write in Canadian Chiropractor and Chiropractic Economics, directing them to my peers. So I use the different platforms within those social media programs to reach my patients and then to reach my peers. And I do that regularly.
So one of the questions I get with social media from chiropractors is, well, we haven't really seen a whole lot of what translates to new patients from being online. Yeah, we have a website. How have you seen that? Do you see a direct correlation between your presence in social media? And if so, what specific strategies are you utilizing?
Yes, Dr. Day, I see a very influential existence with my online presence, and I attribute that to two things. One, I'm consistent with the social media, with posting, with providing information. They always say content is king. But what I find is, because I write so much, over the last 5 years, I've published 110 articles in magazines like Chiropractic Economics, like trade magazines, and then mainstream magazines like Train Magazine, Inside Fitness, and so on and so forth, that if you type my name into the internet, it pops up. So if someone types up chiropractor, the city that I'm in, or chiropractor, my name, all of a sudden I flood the area. And what I'm told by patients, a lot of patients are finding me online. Oh, I found me online. What did you type in? Well, I just typed in the city and chiropractor, and you came up on the first page. So I attribute that to just being in the public eye, flooding the area with content and just being present. So, but that takes time. I believe, that the internet really is new, and I didn't start social media really get into till 2008, 2009. So we're talking about, a period of between 5 and 10 years of really consistent work at it. So I think, again, you have to work at it, and you have to provide quality content and fresh content and just be consistent.
Well, I'm going to drill down into this a bit more because I'm just interested in it. And I think it is today, in this day and age, it's such a remarkable tool that those who came before us didn't have to reach people. And it's probably underutilized as well. So how much time each day do you spend writing and producing content?
Well, I write an article or two every month. I mean, think about 110 articles in 5 years. I'm always writing, so for one publication or another. I would say each day I'm probably putting aside 15 minutes, if I'm really honest with myself, if it's a break between patients and things of that nature. Now, as of late, and this is a help that I may even start utilizing, there's companies that will help you do this, that'll help you utilize this, and I'm just investigating them myself to learn more about them. But that might be an option over time, because you have to think that could be a sizable amount of time. I could be doing something else. But again, being such a new option for chiropractors and business in general, we're going to learn that as we go on. But I would say about 15 minutes a day.
So what would you recommend to the chiropractor who maybe has some thoughts that they want to express and they want to reach out to some of these publications and see if they could get published?
Well, all I do, I kid you not, from the very beginning, I would walk into a magazine store, a grocery store, somewhere where they sold magazines, an airport, and I would see a magazine that was health related. Let's say it's a commercial magazine that's off the shelf, and I would just open the magazine and write down the name or the phone number or the email of the editor and email them and let them know, look, I have some experience writing, and I'm a chiropractor. I can write about different things, and just ask them if they need help. And eventually some of them will ask to see your work or produce something, and that's a segue. The other one is for trade magazines, is do the same thing. And being a chiropractor, and if you can write or want to become a writer, like myself, I wasn't always a great writer, but the more you write, the better you become. So if you have the passion, just ask the editor, and someone will give you the opportunity.
So what else besides social media and writing content is working for you these days in terms of marketing? Nothing else. I don't do any other marketing other than the marketing of actually treating the patient and getting quality results within the office. So I would say word of mouth is helping me there, and which it has been for a while. And the other thing is online. Recently, I've seen a lot of patients come in from just saying they've Googled me or on the internet or on Facebook. So simply right now, it's word of mouth and online presence. Well, let's shift away from marketing, and I want to get over to the nuts and bolts of running a practice. So most of us have employees and CAs and things like that. How do you set goals for those folks and keep them motivated and then revisit those goals?
Well, what I do is with the therapists and even with my support staff, I meet with them every 6 weeks, and the meeting is about 5 minutes. And because in the meeting they have to let me know what their goals are for the following 6 weeks, things that they might want to see improve or questions they have, or we want to keep the machine fine and well oiled. And by communicating with them every 6 weeks, you always keep that conversation going. If I don't speak to them, if for a year passes and I just kind of see them in the hallways, hey, how you doing? How are you? Then I think their sense of value decreases because I haven't made the effort and we haven't really spoken since they were just hired. So every 6 weeks, we make a connection. We talk about their family, see how they're doing. And I think that goes a long way. I once read a quote that said, the shorter the conversation is with you, the longer it becomes with someone else. So if I'm not making them feel valued, then I think they're always not necessarily looking somewhere else, but I don't want them to look somewhere else. I want this to be the place. And the other thing that I do is I make them their arrangements, financial arrangements, their contract arrangements, I make them lucrative or potentially lucrative so that they don't want to leave. I make it a place that they want to come to work and it's a good deal for them. And even if I'm making a little bit less, that's okay because I know I can have you you'll probably stay for a longer period of time.
Yeah, that is so absolutely true. And I know at least in the early years, most of us are running it lean and mean because the money's just not there. But once the money starts coming in, yeah, if you can retain folks that are motivated and they have a slice of the pie that they're engaged in and they, some skin in the game, absolutely. That's the best way. I think a lot of people maybe don't realize the expense that it ends up being when you have to replace somebody.
That's very true. There's more money and time spent on training when you have to or searching for replacements than trying to keep the status quo and keeping everyone happy is worthwhile for many reasons in the long run.
Well, when it comes to hiring associates, what do we need to know about associate contracts?
Well, first of all, you need a contract, and I've been there before where I haven't had a contract, kind of handshake. The contracts are so important because it makes everyone accountable for what their responsibilities are. I had mine drafted up by a lawyer, and it's very specific. Everything is in there from what days they are going to be present to what their percentage is to what room they're going to use, because you need to have that in there. Everyone needs to be aware of what their responsibilities are so then they can be accountable for it. In fact, I wrote a couple of articles about this in Chiropractic Economics and Canadian Chiropractor, and I do offer if any chiropractors want to see the contract, I can give them a copy of it, so they can simply email me at exstore@usa.com, and I give them a draft copy, a non-specific Jane Doe type copy of the contract, so they can use it as a guide if they need it.
Yeah, that's great. I think that I'm on both sides of the equation there. It's important to have that spelled out. We have one that we've been using for a couple of years, but something will happen or there'll be a question, and really just to avoid any bad feelings, it's so important to have things spelled out clearly, as you say, so that we are all on the same page.
Definitely. Even for support staff, I have them, and for other therapists, and it's just a good way to really delineate that line between, coworker, friendship. It really says, this is why we're here, and should we just want to use that as a fallback? And you need that contract.
Well, in terms of patient care, I think we all struggle with patients self-discharging before the care plan is finished. And as we all know, just because the symptoms got better doesn't mean that we aren't still working on a problem that's healing, the iceberg below the surface, so to speak. So what strategies do you have for decreasing patient self-discharge?
Well, it's a difficult thing to control, I think, in any practice, even mine included. But the best way to do it, like I said, is measuring. So being able to measure what your rebook rate is, it indirectly measures how well you communicate what you're telling your patients. In most cases, if you're clear at communicating with your patients where you want their treatment plan to go based on their current state of health, then most will listen to you. And that's all you can really control. If someone is, set on maybe finances or a limitation, or maybe they think, oh, the pain's gone, Dr. Lombardi really doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm just coming back when I have the pain, then that's sometimes just not going to change. But all you can do is improve ways to deliver your message. And that's what I work on with myself and my coworkers. Are we delivering that message from the very beginning, from the room where the chiropractor sees the patient to when they leave to the front end support staff? How are they handling the patient? How are they communicating with the patient? How are they collecting payment? How are they approaching? What questions are they asking? Are they saying, oh, so do you want to rebook? Or are they saying, okay, Dr. Lombardi says he'd like to see you in 2 weeks? Being more authoritative, directive with the questions, not giving them options. And again, if they have it in their mind they don't want to rebook, they're not going to rebook. But we have to position everything and be consistent with it, which is best for the patient's health and at the same time, best for the function of your practice.
So if you don't mind, let's do a little role play and just share with us the words you use. Let's say I call up and say I want to cancel my next appointment because I'm feeling great.
Well, what the front end will do is say, okay, that's great to hear. However, as you know, this injury just happened 2 weeks ago, and although you're feeling well, your muscles are still tight. Just be aware that your muscles can tighten up at any time, and it would be a good idea to see Dr. Lombardi just as a checkup to allow him to make the determination. And then from there, again, we leave it to them. And, some people say, well, we'll chance it, or, okay, we'll see what happens. And more likely than not, what does happen, things tighten up within a month or so, and they're back. And then so the following time, they're more apt to listen to your recommendations.
Yeah, and one of the things I think, now I want to ask you this. This is one of the things I think and I've noticed in practice. There are those cases where I do have that conversation and the patient comes back and I check them and, they are a lot better. And one of the things I've done is sort of turn it over to them and empower them and say, well, okay, I think, you're right. I am feeling a lot less muscle spasm. It looks like your range of motion has improved. And I will go ahead and release them from care, but with the recommendation that if they start seeing this come back, to let us know and come back in. And I've found that by empowering them a little bit like that they will go out and because almost the pressure's off, then they are more likely to come back on their own. And then, of course, I do remind people if there's a care plan or if they're coming back and they're still finding showing that they're not where I wanted them to be, I make that recommendation in those cases. But do you do anything like that? I mean, if it's not there, let them know and empower them.
Of course, because in some cases, a lot of cases, especially in people that are younger, I notice that. For example, if I have an athlete that comes in 24 years old, good shape, had a low back strain or a kink in their neck, I treat them after the first visit. They're doing much better. Or after the first visit, they come back on the second visit, they're doing much better. I say, listen, you're doing well. I'm not seeing any problems. I did the Exstore scan. You're strong all the way through. So you're okay. And these are the words I use. I don't see the need to see you. I don't feel the need to see you any further. However, if anything comes up, call me right away. And what I find, and it's funny you should say that, but what I find is, sure, they're like a little bit shocked sometimes, like, oh wow, really? I only took 1 or 2 visits. That helps with the word of mouth, because they're going to tell people, I went to Dr. Lombardi and a visit or 2, he helped me. And that's good too, because it helps with, sometimes chiropractors have the rep, oh, I went there for 5 years or 6 years. So it's all individually case based. If someone has chronic pain or long-standing injuries, they're going to need treatment long-term. They really are. And if don't and they just had one-off injury, then they're not going to need as much treatment. But we have to level with the patient and give our truly God-honest truth professional opinion.
Well, I want to get back to something you mentioned at the beginning part of this interview, and that was the hard work it takes to build a practice. So one of the things, time is the great equalizer. You and I and Mark Cuban and, everyone in the world has the same amount of time available to us, but we don't always utilize it the same way in terms of efficiency. So one of the things that you do that I find very interesting is the concept of week building. Tell us about that.
Week building, yes. I started doing that about a year ago, and what the week building does, it allows me to predict how busy I'm going to be in the future. And it also allows me to make moves I need to do, whether it's marketing or staffing changes, to allow me to prepare for what's coming in the future. So let me give you an example. At the end of every week, we tally how many patients, remember we're measuring everything, we tally how many patients everyone saw. So how many patients did I see, the other chiropractor, all the massage therapists, the physiotherapists. Then I measure at that point in time, how many patients do they have booked for all of next week? And they come back with a number. Then at that point in time, how many patients are booked 2 weeks out? And then 3 weeks out. So now I have a grid that shows me, okay, this is what we did this week. For next week, we have this many patients booked. For 2 weeks out, we have this many patient books. And 3 weeks out, this many patients booked. And then I follow that pattern. So I take all of those columns. I see 2 weeks out. When that becomes present day, okay, this is how many patients we saw. How many did we have 2 weeks ago? We had this many booked already at this point in time. So what I do is it creates a pattern. So it reaches a point where 1 week when I measure it, if 2 weeks out, I say, wow, that number's really low. Why is that number really low with the physical therapist or my associate chiropractor? Maybe we should do something. So maybe I might do something different on social media promoting that service. Or maybe I might get a road sign. If I see 3 weeks out, the physical therapists are a little slow and it's at the end of, let's say, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, sometimes it's a little slow. We get that road sign out and it stimulates more patient flow for them. So then 3 weeks, I don't have a drop in numbers. So it really allows me to predict and to anticipate cash flow rather than going week to week saying, oh, we had a good week this week. Oh, we had a good week. Oh, we had a bad week. What happened? I want to see the future as much as I can. And so doing week building really helps me do that.
Well, one of the things that I've also seen you speak on is people who are taking their eye off the ball and starting to plan vacations and things while they're trying to build their business or even when it's going. Tell us about that.
Oh, well, my official stance on vacations is don't take them. That's number one. People say, well, you're crazy. What do you mean don't take them? If you're starting a practice or you're starting any business, you have no business taking vacation. Unless you have kids or something of that nature, but if it's just you and you don't have any other dependents and anyone else to think about, you really shouldn't be taking vacation. And even if you have a family and you're just starting out, you really need to focus on what's important, because when you take vacations early on, you're unable to get on a roll. It's like an athlete who gets hot. They make 10 3-pointers in a row, or the quarterback makes 20 completions in a row. You don't pull them out of the game. You can't do that because he's going to get cold again. So if you're doing well and then you decide to take a week off, what happens is you throw everyone's schedule off. You throw your patient's schedule off. Because the patients don't know the future. They're like, well, I'm not sure what I'm doing in 2 weeks. Let me call. So now you have all these uncertainties of these patients. Are they going to call you? Are they going to come in? You don't know. If you get them, you're building a practice. You stay with that practice. I didn't take my first vacation until almost 3 years after I started. And it worked out better for me because, I read this quote, and I love quotes. This one quote, and I don't know who said it. They said, those who make the sacrifice, I will do today, this is what the quote is, I will do today what others won't, so tomorrow I can do what others can't. And sometimes people won't make the sacrifices today, but if you're willing to do that, then tomorrow's going to be so much more fruitful. And taking a vacation or, taking the quarterback out of the game when he's on a 20 completion, he's got 20 completions in a row. Don't take the star athlete out of the game when they're on a roll. Don't take yourself out of the game when you're just starting out and building a practice, because it's going to take time to rebuild that.
Yeah, that's great advice. My wife and I started our practice, and just like you, we did not take our first vacation until the third year, close to the end of that third year. And the guy up the street from us, he literally is 2 blocks away from our practice. He had been in practice a while, and he took his vacations and he took his time off and those sorts of things. But we were there doing the things he was not willing to do, like the saying goes, and that is one of those early keys to our success.
Yeah, and I mean, everyone's different, but, there's no substitute for hard work, that's for sure.
Well, let's get to your third key of success, and that was questioning the norm. So
yes,
that's the how and the why behind what we do as a profession. So why don't you tell us about that? What have you questioned?
Well, I've questioned a lot of things through my writings, and so I've become in my writings, the type of author that really questions the state of our profession, specifically how we're doing in a practice standpoint. Right now in Canada, there's an oversaturation of chiropractors, and that's okay because there's a lot of spines to treat. But what's happening, the first thing I question is the associations and the efforts that the schools are making to prepare us coming out of school. Because no matter how much business advice I give or anyone else gives, if we don't have a good foundation coming out of school, then we're going to have problems adapting. And that's the one thing I talk about questioning the norm, is schools and associations need to do a better job at preparing us. And they're definitely not willing to do so. And they've demonstrated that over and over again. In the United States, each school has their own graduate surveys. And they've had 7 of these schools have taken these exact same surveys every year from 2002 to present day, and they ask them about different things. How's what you learned in technique, how in assessment, and one is business. And all of them in business score their satisfaction rate was 10%, meaning that 90% were unhappy with the business teachings that they had. However, from 2002 to present day, none of those schools have done anything to improve the delivery of their business programs. In fact, here in Canada, the school is looking at removing the business program altogether and saying, well, we're not doing a good job of it. We'll just let the graduates, sign up with a practice building course or something like that to help them build the practice. And I think that's wrong. And I wrote an article recently where the president of the Canadian Chiropractic College actually wrote back and saying, well, Dr. Lombardi doesn't know what he's talking about because A, B, C, and D, which was great because we had got this conversation going. So then I wrote back and I exploited a lot of the deficiencies that he said. And what it did, it opened up this huge conversation. And of course, we never heard from the president anymore because, all of a sudden it looked like, wow, Dr. Lombardi knows what he's talking about, and he's definitely committed to helping students. And so that's one thing. And how are they going to learn? How are the associations and the professions are going to learn? Because it is a political platform, right? And so a lot of these people who are employed by the schools are not going to go against what their schools are teaching or go against their board of governors because they put food on their table. So it's really a slippery slope. But someone at some point has to step up, a president, and say, listen, I've had enough. This is how we're going to do things. You're either with me or you're not. And no one has stepped up yet. So I think we lack leadership. We really lack leadership in schools and at the association level. And until that day comes where someone steps up, then I think we're going to have problems adapting business-wise with all the graduates we have.
Well, let me play devil's advocate with you on this point for just a moment. What do you say to the school who says, well, our job is to help our graduates become competent at adjusting and pass their boards. And like a law school, they teach you how to pass what you need to pass the bar. But whether or not you go to work for a big firm or start your own, put a shingle over your roof and start your own business, that is not within the scope of what we are providing to our students.
Very true. And to the letter of the law, that's all they have to do. But chiropractic is our brand. We have to sell our brand, we have to sell a brand to the public. Only at the best of times, 15% of the population uses chiropractic care. So what I say to that is, sure, you're making us competent, that we're keeping the public safe and we're passing our boards, but we're also we can also be a champion for your brand. So if I graduate and I am not doing well and I fail, I'm a reflection of your school. I called a Porsche dealership. Because I kind of anticipated this question, but I called the Porsche dealership last week and I said, listen, how much is your most expensive car? He said, well, the one we have in stock is $150,000. I said, okay. I said, listen, I've never driven a Porsche. I don't know how to drive a manual transmission. If I buy it, will you show me how it works? Will you teach me how to drive it and show me the ins and outs? He said, of course, sir. I said, we would never send you out without learning how to drive it. I said, why not? He said, well, you're a reflection of our brand. If you go out there and you're not driving the Porsche like it's meant to be driven, then we don't want you to drive it because you're essentially an advertisement for us. So conversely, a chiropractic student will spend about $150 on the chiropractic education. Shouldn't you teach them how to drive it successfully rather than just existing? That's my point.
Well, I see your point. I think it's a valid point, and something certainly I think that the schools should take a closer look at how they can support people beyond just passing the boards and being competent adjusters. Because you're right. I mean, the second we are out of whatever school we graduate from, we are ambassadors for the profession and for the institution that they graduate from. Well, let's shift away from what we've talked about so far, and let's get into another aspect or dimension of your career, and that is primarily, at least a part of your career, treating the sports athlete. And the reason I'm interested in this is because so many people enter into chiropractic because they are athletes themselves and they had an injury and they recovered, or they just really they want to treat athletes. It's their bread and butter. It's what they want to do. It's not an uncommon story. So what does a doc need to do to become a sports chiropractor at the professional level like you've done?
Well, essentially, your approach in terms of technique has to mirror the needs of athletes. So using a functional assessment, using tools like myofascial release, even acupuncture, things of that nature that focus on muscle healing and addressing muscle injuries, that's number one. And then two is a little bit of luck. How I started, I just had one patient come and see me who was with the professional football team here in the Canadian Football League in my city, and I treated him and he liked it, and then he told another guy who told another guy who told another guy, and next thing you know, you have the whole team. So one is having the foundation, and two is just putting yourself in a position where you're attracting those types of athletes. So to start out, I started out when I first graduated with the semi-pro football team in the city, and I volunteered my time with them. And then I did work with high schools, sports, and local colleges. And at that time, when you're starting out of school, you're volunteering your time because you want to get your name out there and you want to keep your skills sharp. So that was a motivating factor. And in the back of my mind, I said I do want to treat pro athletes one day, and it just kind of manifested in that way.
So I had a friend that went down this similar path. He didn't get to the level that you did, but he found that he had trouble turning the corner from volunteering his time to getting paid for his time. How did that come about for you?
First of all, the teams that I volunteered for didn't have any money. That was clear. Like, high school sports, semi-pro sports, like essentially these players were playing for bus money. So I didn't really expect much there. But when you get to the pro level, when the players are earning real money, you need to draw that line because they expect you to be there, let's say, twice a week. And volunteering your time, especially if you're a veteran chiropractor, really devalues your product and devalues the profession because it makes it difficult for other people to jump in and do the same thing. What I simply said is, listen, I'd love to help, but my practice is getting a lot busier. If you want to see me, you can see me here at the practice. And this is the fee schedule. And sometimes you want to give them a break, depends on how you feel about that. If you get a lot of patients coming in from this organization, you can do that. The other thing you can do is speak to the president or the owner of the organization and see if they want to get you on a contract where they're paying you so much. But really, treating athletes is not that lucrative. It really isn't in the greater scheme of things. If your practice is doing well, you're better off spending your time in your practice and letting the athletes come to you. Very few athletes, chiropractors, unless they're treating specific stars, are doing very well with, financially with treating star athletes. And the other thing, there's a lot of travel. So if you have a family, it's difficult because you're going to be away from your family a lot if you're following the athletes across the country.
So if someone is looking to get into sports chiropractic with professional teams, do you recommend they work their way up from treating the high school and the college level and on up, or just do your thing and like you said, if the right person wanders in from a professional team or semi-professional, you go from there?
I think if you want to make it a goal, definitely be proactive and get involved with different minor sports, whether it's high school or junior sports, things of that nature. And then as well, people are going to walk into your office because people are from all walks of life and know different people, and you're going to get the athletes walking in anyway. So, but the key is having that skill set, the assessment and treatment tools to treat athletes. If you don't have that skill set, if you just do straight manipulation, you're not going to be as well versed to give these athletes what they want. In fact, I wrote an article in 2012 where I interviewed a bunch of NFL, NHL, CFL, soccer professionals, and it's called What Athletes Want. And they tell us what exactly they're looking for, and it's a combination of soft tissue work to go along with the adjustment.
So that brings me to my next question. Is there any specialized equipment the sports chiropractor needs to invest in?
No, just their education. Learning those techniques that I mentioned, functional assessment system, and learning how to use their hands really well.
Well, did you get an EMT certification or anything that would allow you to treat on sidelines, or is that even required? I don't believe it may be required in some states. It wasn't here because they had medical staff. Like, I was just the staff chiropractor. I'm thinking back to when I was the semi-pro doc, because I was on field there. But I did have my CPR and first aid at that time. And whether it was required, I wasn't sure. Well, is there anything else we should know if we're an aspiring sports chiropractor who are looking to get into that field?
Just if that's your goal, just keep working hard and it'll happen.
Well, this podcast is all about providing actionable content for our listeners, and those break down into two groups of individuals. Those are the new docs and recent grads who are, out there doing it and getting started for the first time and making it happen. And then there's those folks who have been in practice a while, they're seasoned, but they're stuck. They're maybe not where they want to be, and they're looking to grow their practice. What action steps do you have that both of those categories can start implementing tomorrow?
First, a new doc, like I said, is, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, but forget what you learned in school. They got you through. They did their job. And if you want to be really good, you need to find a mentor who's really good. And if they're really good, they're going to be different from what was taught in school. If you have 100 graduates coming from your class, and if you all do what you were taught in school, you're going to have 100 of the same chiropractors. And no one's going to be successful. You're all going to be average at best. So forget what you learned in school. Question things. Shadow a lot of different chiropractors and be open to different things. That's how you're going to become successful if you're a new doc. If you're an experienced doc that's kind of stuck and wants to make a change, simply you have to be open to change. Some chiropractors who are stuck say, I want to change, I want to do something different, I want to maybe change the way I assess or the way I treat, but really they're looking for a solution that doesn't change the way they practice. They're looking for a solution that fits the way they practice, which means they're never going to change, because you need to break your comfort zone if you're actually looking to do something different. So you have to be open to change. That's absolutely true.
Well, let's step away from the world of chiropractic and talk about the bigger picture of success in life. And you have obviously been very successful in your career. We learn a lot from that, but we tend to learn more from the obstacles we've overcome. So can you share with us a failure or a challenge or an obstacle you've had in life and how you overcame that?
Up to this point, I've been blessed. My life has been outstanding. I've had every opportunity to exert my success, and I'm thankful for that. From a business standpoint, though, what I had to learn is how to become a manager. When you're really treating patients all the time, and then your practice gets bigger, and you have to learn how to deal with people, because you're not really taught that anywhere in school or anywhere else. That's kind of a skill you acquire through time. And what I found was I was at times with my support staff, my therapist, kind of just not really addressing issues, not communicating with them like I do now every 6 weeks. And that was leading to not people leaving, but, kind of an undercurrent of sometimes frustration and sometimes just not an environment that you would want to work in all the time, And so what I did is I stopped and I recognized this and I started to address it, and things really started to change. And it wasn't all about the money for the therapist. It was about communicating with them and making them feel valued. So learning to become a manager, learning how to communicate with people is something that I went from being very obtuse to being like, no, I'm a chiropractor, I'm treating the patients, I'm getting quality results, that's all that matters, to wait a minute, that's good, quality results matter, but let's take care of the entire ship, rather than just giving it fuel.
I want to highlight for our listeners, the word communication has come up several times in this interview, whether it's communicating with patients so that they don't drop off from care prematurely, or communicating with our staff, or training our staff to be better communicators. This seems to be a pretty universal thing amongst those who are successful in chiropractic.
It sure is. And I remember in school, I learned my patient communication course, and that's one thing that really stuck out to me. Dr. Good was fantastic. And he addressed, and this is another thing that if your listeners or any chiropractors request this, they can just email me at exstore@usa.com. It's called the hot list of 100 questions. And it's the 100 questions that you need to have answers for, ready answers for, and usually they're the answers from questions from patients. And it's all about communication. Always being ready at any time, at any place, whether you're in the supermarket or you're in your office. How do you answer the question if you get the question like, oh, I heard chiropractic causes this, or this is bad for you? How do you answer that diligently and in an educated manner? But communication with everyone, your coworkers, the patients, is so important. And I've learned that.
Well, in life, who are your personal heroes?
That's easy. It's my wife. As I mentioned, my wife, Monica. She's definitely my hero because she's also self-employed, and she's not just self-employed. She's a mom. She's a wife. She does everything around here. Then my kids, because I look at them and I think, you know, how blessed I am. And then my parents, because from the beginning they were there for me, providing the support system when I was starting practice, and then, you know, throughout my whole life. So it'd have to be them.
Well, is there anything you do on a daily basis, affirmations, some sort of ritual that you do that help keep you on track and motivated and towards success each day?
Well, I mean, I measure everything at work, but personally, I thank God for everything that I have, and I ask Him to protect my family, and I just take it a day at a time and give it my best.
Well, you've been so generous with your time today, but unfortunately all good things must end, and we are drawing to a close with this interview. But before you go, we have a few final thoughts. Do you have a favorite book that you would like to recommend to Mojo Nation?
Yes, the one book that kind of sort of changed things for me, it's called The Rework, REWORK, by Jason Fried. It's a great way which demonstrates, it varies from the norm on how businesses are run, and it's some great ideas that how it can maybe be implemented into any business to run things a little more efficiently.
Well, we will link to that in our show notes. When this episode goes live, we're going to list that and bullet points of everything we've talked about. What's the best business advice anyone's ever given you?
The best business advice would be to value yourself. Like I mentioned earlier, is, don't devalue, make sure that you're getting what you're worth in terms of your scheduled fees, that you're not volunteering your time too much. Draw the line and be strict about what your value is. But secondly, being greedy doesn't pay. Don't be too greedy. If you're making $100 off something, but you can keep that therapist that's making you the $100, if you only take 90 or 95, that's okay, because consistency is better than inconsistency. So greed doesn't pay.
Well, Dr. Anthony Lombardi, thank you so much for not being greedy with your time, being very generous with your time today. You've provided so much value for our listeners and advice on a wide variety of topics. I truly appreciate you spending time with us today. What is the best way for everyone to reach you and connect with you and find out more about what you do?
The best would be to connect with me directly is email exstore@usa.com, EXSTORE@usa.com. Also, they can find me on Facebook and Instagram, and of course online on the Hamilton Back Clinic website, hamiltonbackclinic.com.
Well, again, we will link to those in our show notes, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Day. You have a great week.
Thanks Thanks for listening to the Chiro Business Mojo podcast at www.chirobusinessmojo.com.